All right, hello. Thank you for joining. I am Sarah Smith. I am the Assistant Director of Curriculum Development at CALI, and I'm going to be talking about preparing and engaging law students through the CALI Summer Challenge. So first, I'm going to report on the CALI Summer Challenge. It's a new program that we just launched in 2023, so it is new for us. And so I'll tell you how it went, what it is, and then I'm going to actually talk about the various ways in which your school and your students can get involved with the Summer Challenge or with something just like it, but that you have more control over. All right. So first, what were the goals of the CALI Summer Challenge? So the first was to give incoming 1Ls a head start, both by helping them to gain foundational skills before they even step foot in that first day of class, and the opportunity to explore some key 1L concepts before their first day. Another was to provide law schools with just another way to engage with their students and to prepare them before law school starts. And then, of course, from the CALI side, we want to introduce students to CALI's materials and encourage to continue to use them through the duration of their law school experience. And so hoping to get to them as eager 1Ls when they'll absorb all of the things, right? And then while we were there, why not get some feedback on CALI lessons as a learning tool? All right. So what was the summer challenge, right? This is the verbatim, the information that we posted online. But what it was we curated a number of CALI lessons within our library already that we thought were particularly fit for incoming 1Ls. We broke them down into 4 categories and we created some guidelines. We said, if you run 10 lessons within these guidelines, we will give you a certificate, right? And that's really it. It's that easy. We said you have to choose your own lessons from a list of lessons available. Again, selected specifically because we thought they would be beneficial to incoming 1Ls. These were the rules, right? Of course, incoming 1Ls already have access to all of CALI's materials, so it is there for the taking. So they had to register for an account. Then they go ahead and they start running the lessons. They can go and track their progress through their CALI account, of course, just like you can as a student later on. And then once they have completed the 10 lessons in line with the guidelines, we had them just go to a simple Google form, let us know, hey, I've completed those 10 lessons. I would then go in and check whether or not they did in fact meet the criteria of the challenge. And then we emailed them a certificate. So I told you that we had a number of lessons broken down into 4 different categories. The first was foundation. Students were able to choose any 4 from this list of lessons. And so these are things like analysis 1, thinking like a lawyer. Melissa, I think you wrote that one. Also law school lingo, how to navigate a brand new vocabulary. You also wrote that one. But things like law school resources, right? Words matter, primary versus secondary sources. These are all things that, if you're not familiar with our law school success category of lessons, it's our newest category of lessons. And it really is these foundational skills that every law student needs, right? The second category was class prep. Students were able to choose any 4 from this list, right? So things like case briefing, IREC, outlining, things that every student absolutely needs, but are foreign concepts when they actually start law school. So this will give them a head start to learn about these things that they have to know. I mean, I don't know about you, but outlining meant a completely different thing before I started law school, right? So to give them this kind of knowledge before they even step foot through the door on that first day of class. And then we wanted to give them some introduction to some 1L key concepts, as I mentioned before. So one from the first list, which was first year course introduction. So battery basics, overview and sources of contract law, sources of criminal law and statutory interpretation. We just wanted them to experience at least one of those. And then legal research, right? So anatomy of a case, introduction to secondary resources, introduction to state and federal statutes. Where does law come from? Now, of course, they weren't limited to just these, right? They could literally run all of these and then literally any of the other 1,300 plus lessons within the CALI library. But these were the ones specifically included in this challenge available for students. All right, here's the form. We had the complete, like I said, when they were all done, they let us know and made it easier on our end to just look at the people who had committed to the challenge and who were purporting to have completed it. So here's the form. very basic information. And then of course we ask for some feedback on the CALI lessons themselves, on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. Do you feel more prepared? Do you feel like you got new information? So on and so forth. And I'll actually share those results with you in a second. All right, and here's the certificate they get, right? Proudly presented to student of the law school. So yeah, they get to have a certificate that shows that they, went above and beyond. They can use it for bragging rights. They could put it on their resumes. They could put it on their LinkedIn, anything like that, right? All right. So how did it go? Right. Again, this is a new program for us. We launched it kind of later in 2023. It is currently operational right now. But this is the results from the first round of the challenge in 2023. So how did it go? 261 unique students accessed at least one lesson, right? So they went into the system, they saw that a CALI lesson exists, they went to our website, very cool. Out of those 261 students, 192 answered at least one question in a lesson. Now I say at least one question because that was my criteria for inclusion in this stat. But the vast majority of them answered more than one question, right? They actually ran a lesson. Cool. All right. That amounted to 1,450 lesson runs total for this challenge, right? And again, answered at least one question. That was where I drew the line, but the majority of them, that equates to 1,451 lesson runs, right? And then in total, 43 students completed the challenge. That means they did those 10 lessons within the 4 categories. They chose the number of lessons they were supposed to. Just a few I had to reach out and say, like, you did the lessons, but not the right categories. And so they quickly completed another one, right? Importantly, I think, is that many of these students ran more than the required 10 lessons, right? They ran these 10 lessons and then they did like a bunch more, which is great, right? That means they were exploring the site, they were exploring other lessons, they were engaging with the material, and the more they're running, the more they're learning. All right. Student feedback. This was from that form they filled out. So we asked them on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. Do you feel more prepared for law school after running these CALI lessons? So great, 60% were in the strongest agreement category. Almost 90% were in those top 2 categories, right? 4 and 5 at that strongly agree on. So I consider anything in the 4 and 5 pretty good. All right. I learned new information in these CALI lessons. Again, close to 80% strongly agree with that statement. And if you include the people who are in the 4 category who agree, we're talking over 90%, right? I plan to take more CALI lessons on my own. Close to 60% of students strongly agree with that statement. If you include the 4 category, again, I think we're math, somewhere over 80%, right? Yeah, this is not a math heavy one. Yeah, notice how I'm not mentioning anything about AI either. All right, and then I like the format of CALI lessons, right? So over 50% strongest agreement with that statement, and then almost 80% if you include the 4 category as well. So these are some, we asked them just generally, give me your comments too, right? So people seem to like these. These are literally all of the comments we got. So I'm not leaving any out. So the good, the bad, but the vast majority of them are good, right? So I like the variety of CALI lessons. I felt engaged. I feel a lot more prepared and excited for law school to begin, right? Very challenging, but very rewarding. It also brought to our attention some grievances, particularly with a question type where you answer multiple questions, but there's only one point available. So I think 2 students mentioned that, but that's not news to us. All right. Now, ways to get involved, right? What does this mean for you, for your students? First, tell your students to run the CALI Summer Challenge, right? It really is easy as sending them to cali.org/summer challenge. You give them the information in orientation, in your admissions packet, via an email, shout it, I don't care. Tell them to do it, we handle the rest. We're literally tracking whether or not they are meeting the criteria of the challenge. I check it, I reach out to them with the certificate. Great, just let them know that it exists. All of the information is contained on one web page. They're not jumping around the website. We put the links to each individual lesson within that one page. It's super easy for students to participate. Another way is you can create your own program using CALI materials, right? So that means more control over the types of materials that the students are engaging with. And then of course, you'll get access to those grades and analytics. The way that we did the summer challenge was I created lesson links. If you're not familiar with it, a lesson link is a way to assign a lesson to your students. And if the students run the lesson through this unique URL that you created just for your students, just for your course, you get to see all the student grades and detailed lesson analytics. So I have all that information if you're sending them to the summer challenge, but you can make your own and you can get the grades and the analytics. And then number 3, some hybrid of number 1 and number 2. If you have some great idea about how we can help you run your own challenge where we play a part and you play a part, I'm all for it. All right. So possible program variations, if you were to take it into your own hands and create your own program, different materials, right? We have over 40 different subject areas of CALI lessons, right? Over 1,300 lessons across 40 different subject areas. You choose what topics, you choose what lessons. And then of course, through our CALI author program, you can edit any of the lessons. So you don't have to use them as is. You can edit the lessons, you can assign them, you can remove parts, add video, add pictures, add content. You can really make them however you want to be and assign those, right? A different timeline, right? We do it through the course of the summer. We give them till October 1st, right? Because we want to hit students in the summer and who are just kind of starting out. But you can choose how long the program runs and when. Of course, different requirements, right? We have 10 lessons across 4 categories. They choose 4 in 2 of the topics, 1 in each of the others, but that would completely be within your control. And then of course you can require that they get some sort of score. We don't have that. We're seeing it as a learning opportunity, not so we don't say you have to get 99% or anything like that. Of course, you would be able to host it on your own site, right? Whether it's your own website for your school or an LMS. Right now, the summer challenge lives on the CALI website. And then, of course, a different subset of students. We chose incoming 1Ls. It doesn't have to be that. And CALI is exploring other challenges as well. What if you choose lessons that are particularly targeting students who just completed 1L year, right? They're going into their 2L year, they're going into their 3L year. There are both law school success lessons that we have that are fitting for that particular time in the student's law school progress, as well as, substantive courses, right? We break our lessons down by 1L year and upper level, right? So we have a number of lessons in these upper level courses as well. So you can engage with them over winter break, for instance, right? If you just want them to do a handful of lessons in their winter break leading into that next semester, of course, that's something that you're able to do. All right. And these are just snapshots of some materials that we compiled for a different pipeline program, but this is just to show the ways in which you can expand a program using CALI materials that are available online. Again, your student has access to these before they even go into law school. They have access to all 1,300 plus lessons, but they also have access to other materials we have, which include our E-Langdell books, right? And E-Langdell, regardless of membership, they're available for free online, right? So you have access to a Word version, a PDF, ebooks, and then print can buy them. Students can buy them at cost through a print on demand partner. But what that means is, here we kind of package these. Again, these are just snapshots. So the one on the left is a snapshot of a torts, a packaging of torts materials, right? Where it has a reading from one of our free open books online, and then the CALI lessons that are associated with that particular segment of reading. And that book actually includes interactive elements within the text. And so we actually broke down some, where are the interactive components within that book. And so, if you really wanted to expand and provide to your student in these off times, in the summer, on winter break, they don't have to buy anything. It's all sitting right there on the CALI website, available for them to use. And you have control as to what types of materials you assign to them. All right. The logistics around creating your own program are pretty simple. Of course, you decide on the rules and the materials. You would create lesson links for each subset of students. So lesson link is the way that faculty assign lessons to a segment of students, right? So one course in one semester. You would just do that, but it's a different group of students, right? So you provide the lesson links to that target group, whoever you want to run the lessons. Once they run the lessons through the lesson links, you get access to the grades and analytics. All right. Yes, Elmer.
Oh, you can give me the microphone anyway.
Yeah.
All right, for the
For
recording.
the folks online.
So would if folks decide to run their own program, can we set them up with certificates?
So that's kind of what I had in mind for the hybrid situation, right? If you want to choose your own materials, but you want us to still handle, you still want them to get a certificate, right? Because that's cool, that's fun. Yeah, we could do that. That's kind of what I had in mind for that. Yes.
So for the 43 that did complete last year, were you seeing it from one school that was heavily like coming from a school, or was it just sort of
It
they
was
randomly
scattered.
found it?
It
Yeah.
was, I mean, sure, there were, a handful of students maybe from one school. Obviously, that school had done, a really good job getting the word out. But we did, I don't have the data in front of me, but there were a number of schools with students involved. Yeah. Anything else?
So kind of less of a question and more of a shout out a little bit to the lesson link. When I was teaching, I would use a lot of these similar lessons and send them out pre-orientation. So roughly July, and I would say, hey, these 12 CALI lessons are required before you get to orientation. Now I couldn't really require them because they didn't know that. But what I would find out through Lesson Link is I would track who did them and who didn't. And that alone was a really good indicator of who might need early intervention. And I also found out that the students that completed all the required ones actually increased their GPA, accounting for other factors. So that was good. So it wasn't even so much how they did on the lesson, but just completing it or not. And I thought that was really helpful. I also appreciate the comments about scoring because those might have been my lessons. And we struggled with like how to score some of it because it's skills based. So there's not always a right answer. And I don't think students like that. Shocking. But yeah, use the lesson links is what I'm trying to say.
I swear we didn't plan that.
I'm really sorry to make you sprint. Melissa, you said it raised the GPA. Do you have like a micro number point you can share, or just sort of any detail on that? Like, no, I'll slowly walk toward you. No, I'm sorry.
Actually, I had a question online. It's also a follow-up correlation between grades and summer challenge.
Yeah, so this was just based on my students at one school, so I cannot say that it's overreachingly statistically significant. I am not a statistician. I also don't do math, but it was 0.2, and that's accounting for incoming stats. That's not like, because you would expect certain students to be more inclined to do the lessons and then do better. And 0.2 doesn't seem like a lot, but it kind of is, especially if you're dealing with students who are on that. They could have been on probation, and it's a lot for a lot of students.
Speaking of Lesson Link, I have one here. It's for those of you who are not familiar with Lesson Link and what you get access to. If you assign a lesson through a Lesson Link, I will show you. So here, the course is CALI Author Training. The semester was fall 2023. And here is the lesson that I assigned, right? The counter argument, a key but often overlooked part of legal reasoning. That is one of the lessons in our law school success subject. The number of runs is 11. Don't worry, I'm not about to reveal any student data. These are my colleagues who ran this lesson. So if you look at the grades, right?
Oh, we're not seeing that.
Oh, interesting. Oh, here. I will. Got it now?
Yeah. No,
Great.
sorry.
Okay, yeah. So these are the grades, right? These are, right? Sorry for those in the room who didn't do well. They did it as a, as a favor, right? Just to get a variety of scores, right? So these are all of the students who ran the lesson. Note that I'm on there multiple times because I ran the lesson multiple times, right? So for the grades, you'll see every time a student runs a lesson. And then for the analytics, right, you get a breakdown at the top that looks a little bit like the grades, except for that it just takes into account the student's first attempt at a question, regardless of the number of attempts at that lesson, at the student's first attempt at a question, regardless of the number of runs. So you can see Jennifer Chan got 71% of the questions that she attempted correct, whereas John Mayer got a low 29% of the questions that he attempted correct. Right. That explains it. All right, and if you scroll down, it's actually broken down by question performance, right? So in the left-hand column, these are all of the questions that were in the lesson. For instance, 86% of students who attempted this question got it correct. If you go to the bottom, 14% of students who attempted question 2 got it correct. So you can see, where are students struggling with the material, right? If everybody's getting something wrong, well, first check the question, and if it's us, let us know. But it's an opportunity for intervention, for following up on specific types of material within the lesson. You can go a step further and choose this include response breakdown, where you can see the breakdown of responses. It's so appropriately named. So for instance, 2 people selected B to get this question wrong. 5 people selected A to get it right. So you can see how the students were actually answering. And again, if you see, a number of students selecting one particular wrong answer, good opportunity to follow up on that. Once you include response breakdown, you then have the opportunity to list students for each response. Now I can see how every student answered every single question, right? So again, just a way to kind of see where students might be struggling with, with the material, and particular students who might be struggling. So if you ran your own program, and if you just use Lesson Link generally, because, we encourage you to do that in order to assign CALI lessons, you get access to all of this information. So, all right. Yeah, Ranella.
About the information that we give to new schools who are going to use Lesson Link. When you give them the virtual demo, do you give them this information?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, not specifically about the summer challenge. We will start.
No.
But
like,
generally,
the information like this will tell you like where they might be
yes,
struggling.
I show them that exact thing.
I will
every
need your
time.
help with rewriting some of the information that I give to them about Lesson Link.
Absolutely. I show them
Thank
how to
you.
create them, whether it's CALI materials within the library, or materials that they've made themselves with CALI Author, or lessons that they've edited. Yeah, and then how to assign them, and then how to access the grades and analytics.
I think that some of the information that you're giving today would help me if I give it to them. It might help them decide whether they need a virtual demo or not.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Yep, I think we just want to. Yeah, I'm gonna share it. It looks pretty good. It looks right. 1 second, Corinne.
Sure.
Good. Okay. Yeah, you're good to go, Corinne. We can
I'm good.
see your slides in the
Great.
room.
So thank you, Elmer, in particular, for having me back at CALI. It's been a while since I presented here, and it may be a while before I do again, given the mishigas I put Elmer through over the last few days. So we'll see. Hope you guys are having a great conference. I know you didn't have to talk about AI last time, but I'm going to raise it here. So normally when I come to conferences or I attend webinars on AI, often legal ethics will come up, like, Rule 1, Comment 8 about competency or confidentiality or supervision, reasonableness of fees, candor to the tribunal, all of those things come up. And that's not what I want to talk about today. Instead, I want to talk about the ethics of AI itself. So before we do that, I just want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So, with the buzz of ChatGPT, and everybody, there's so many articles, every single day you're getting inundated with information about generative AI. I just want to remind people that lawyers have been using AI for quite some time, and the courts have been using it too. So I just want to set the stage. So you guys, the librarians in the room in particular, are familiar with that, That should be natural language processing, not national language processing. But you guys know what this is, right? It helps a computer understand language, and it generates a result using largely data extraction and question answering techniques. It's not typically focused on generating new original content. Then there's predictive AI, right? So this is the AI systems that are using historical data and machine learning and algorithms and statistical models to predict future outcomes. So lawyers forecasting the success rates, the likely success of a case, or eliminate or trying to determine the duration of litigation, or predicting the behavior of a judge, how likely they are to rule out a particular motion, how likely is a defendant to be a recidivist. Then there's extractive AI, right? Legal databases, contract review, e-discovery, where you're identifying and extracting relevant information and labeling that data. Generative AI, which is all the rage now, right? Creates original content, text, images, video, audio, and large language models that work on text itself. So for drafting documents, creating summaries, analyzing facts, drafting deposition questions, etc. Right? So they LLMs learn the grammar rules and the syntax and semantic meaning and context from an enormous corpus of data. And then there's adaptive AI, right, which learn and adapt from the behavior of the user, or from predominantly from user feedback. So systems that improve over time, they're exposed to more cases, more documents, more user interaction. They, for example, an AI legal research platform that might refine or personalize results based on provide recommendations based on the lawyer's previous searches and feedback. And none of these are mutually exclusive, right? So adaptive technology in particular uses extractive techniques, predictive techniques, and generative AI techniques. Then there's where we are now. So we're at there's three different types of AI, broadly speaking. There's narrow, where we are, or weak AI, and then there's artificial general intelligence and super intelligence. So narrow is focused on a single domain, right? It's it cannot generalize its knowledge to other areas. So an autonomous vehicle is not going to generate new content, right? It's not going to do any image recognition. So they're, even though they're very complicated and they deliver fantastic results, they're still limited to their particular domain. So it's like if you have bees who are experts at developing hives, and beavers excellent at developing dams, no matter how much education you give to a beaver, it's never going to create a hive, right? That's kind of where we are. Then there's AGI, and there's a race towards getting AGI in place. Sam Altman's goal at OpenAI is to get there. So this is the type of AI that will be able to perform intellectual tasks that any human can, right? Understand, learn, apply knowledge, reason, solve problems, right? And the IQ is estimated to be between 150 and 200, which is a scary prospect for lawyers, because it will be able to do all the things that lawyers currently can do. But it could be a good solution for access to justice problem in the United States. So we'll see how that rolls out. But we're, depending on who you talk to, we're at least years away from AGI. And then there's super intelligence, which, you know, if you think of HAL in 2001, or you think of the Terminator, that's kind of where super intelligence is, right? IQ of about 350 or more, can surpass human intelligence in virtually every domain, including scientific creativity, social skills, general wisdom, may even revolutionize law in itself. Okay, so there are 3 resolutions from the ABA. The first was in 2019, recognizing that lawyers were using AI back then. And the resolution states that lawyers must be informed about AI's ability to deliver efficient, accurate legal services to clients while keeping in mind the ethical requirements and limitations. Lawyers must exercise independent judgment, communicate with clients, and supervise the work performed by AI. So AI is very new. There was I don't know if you read about Judge Newsom or whether this has come up already. So forgive me for being redundant if it has, but Judge Newsom in the 11th District relied on ChatGPT in order to determine a definition of landscaping, which was not defined in the insurance policy. And the case turned on what landscaping was. And he encourages, in that concurrence, he encouraged lawyers and judges to use generative AI. And as far as communication goes, the New York Bar Association released something about what you can include in your representation agreement if you are using generative AI. So I just included that language here. You know, while representing you, we may use generative AI tools and technology to assist in legal research, document drafting, and other legal tasks. Enables us to provide more efficient and cost-effective legal services. However, it's important to note that while generative AI can enhance our work, it is not a substitute for the expertise or judgment of our attorneys. We will exercise professional judgment, right? So having your client sign off on that could be a huge benefit. Resolution 700 from 2022 has to do, it's in the criminal justice context. And aims to address racial and economic biases reflected in pretrial risk assessments, pushes for transparency, evaluation, modification of risk assessment tools to eliminate biases. So those are two of the things I want to talk about, transparency and bias. It also calls for educating judges that pretrial release criteria may reflect these biases. And urges requiring the public disclosure of the steps that are taken to eliminate the biases, right? So it understands that, or the reason this resolution came out was with the understanding that individuals' criminal history and criteria that are reflected in the risk assessment tools may reflect structurally biased and application of laws, and conscious or unconscious biases of law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, and others involved. So it also advocates for an ongoing independent evaluation of pretrial risk assessment tools. Then Resolution 604 from March of last year. This is a very, very long document, but basically it provides guidance on how the legal system and lawyers should assess the fundamental issues with AI, focusing on the principles of accountability, transparency, and traceability. Okay, so I am going to touch on competence for a moment, just because this is the overarching consideration. So we've all heard about poor Stephen Schwartz in the Southern District of New York and his 6 fictitious cases that were hallucinating by ChatGPT, but certainly he is not the only one who has done this. Lawyers across the country have engaged in the same thing. He just unfortunately happened to be in the New York media market, so they picked up on it, and it, you know, everybody in the world heard about it. Michael Cohen, also in the New York media market, was also he used ChatGPT to help out his attorney, and it hallucinated 3 cases, which were then filed with the court. There was one lawyer who used a platform to write his closing arguments. He also had a financial interest in that AI, so he is being sued for malpractice, and he's been sanctioned as well. That led to Judge Starr in Texas being the first federal court judge to issue a standing order to make sure that if you do use generative AI, that you that you inform the court, you disclose that to the court, and that you have also reviewed that content to make sure that it's accurate. So a little bit about bias. So systems can inherit bias from the data they're trained on and from the humans that designed the algorithms, right? That could lead to incorrectly predicting recidivism rates or recommending harsher sentences for certain demographic groups. So when you're using Lexis AI, at Lexis Plus AI litigation tools, for example, to analyze damage awards, attorneys should keep at least these two things in their minds when they're evaluating that juries in tort actions routinely consider a plaintiff's race when calculating compensation for tort damages, and they do so in a manner that systematically results in lower awards to Black plaintiffs than white plaintiffs. And medical providers tend to view Black patients' injuries as less severe than if the patient is white. And jurors may rely on those expert opinions, which might also reinforce their own biases. Also, there's a bias against people with neurodivergent conditions. So a recent paper showed that there's AI bias toward a range of these conditions, including autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, OCD, and that when the language in the large language models is tokenized and the associations with those words are formed, the words related to neurodiversity are associated with groups of words that are related to danger or disease or badness or other negative impacts. So when you enter into one of these risk assessment tools that the person has autism or they have epilepsy, they will get a harsher review than if you enter in the person is a bank robber, just because of the way that these connections are made. So results may overemphasize some risks, right? They may weight some risks associated by the bias in these tools of violence or danger, right? And may undervalue their strengths, such as honesty and strong moral code. They might misinterpret behaviors that are reported to the risk assessment tools, seeing them as signs of aggression or seeing lack of remorse, right? And not understanding that the communication is very different. So one of these systems, right? We don't really have any regulation regarding biases in these systems yet, although many have been proposed. And other than the EU AI Act, there are really no federal regulations at all, and states are working on some of them. Biden administration released a blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, which addresses some of these concerns, but it was followed by an executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy development and the use of AI that incorporated some of these principles, some of these ethical principles. I was on a webinar yesterday. They were talking about the progress towards those of the different agencies, but it's very, very complicated. And so far, the different frameworks are voluntary. I just want to put in a plug, if you guys haven't read this book, Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill. She goes through how algorithms can further, and algorithms can affect people's decisions that are high stake for people, right? That can affect their lives and their rights. Like predictive policing disproportionately targets minority neighborhoods, and credit scoring algorithms may penalize people not for their own actions, but for the actions of the people who are like them due to aggregated data. It's an exceptional book, a very eye-opening about all the different biases in these different systems. There's also Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism, by Safayaya, I think, Noble. Also a very good book on bias and algorithms. Then there's explainability. This is the ability to understand and interpret the decisions or actions by an AI system. So an example could be a system that recommends denying bail to a defendant, but cannot explain the specific factors that led to that recommendation, making it very difficult to justify that recommendation to the courts. Like, what did you consider? It doesn't know because the different weights are applied differently. Or an AI system that recommends how much a case should settle for, you may not be able to explain why this is being recommended. There's transparency issues, right? This refers to openly communicating and disclosing meaningful information about an AI system's workings, capabilities, and limitations. This is really the black box that I'm sure you've heard about. It's like the way that I describe the inner workings or the lack of transparency is if you have young children or have been exposed to them and you look inside the brain of a 2-year-old and try to figure out what is given more weight or less weight to different connections that they're making as they explore and experience the world around them, you really don't know why it is that they can see, 3 cats and that's all they've seen, and then see an entirely different cat and recognize that that's a cat also, right? We don't know why some connections are made more concretely than others have. And that's the same thing with these algorithms, right? The people who write them cannot even explain exactly what is being done inside the black box. And for lawyers, this could cause real problems, right? It could lead to flawed reasoning. It may arrive at conclusions or recommendations based on flawed logic because it's weighing different factors, but the lawyer doesn't know how. And they can't examine the reasoning process in order to identify errors, right, which are leading to reliance and faulty legal analysis. The training data may be relying on outdated or incomplete data. So the outputs may no longer be valid, but there's no way to see what it's relying on when it's making its output. Misapplied precedents. The AI might draw improper analogies between different cases or misapply legal precedents. And without being able to see and examine the factors that the AI is considered and how it's weighting similarities and differences in cases, lawyers could rely on recommendations that improperly apply past rulings to a current case. And the AI may weight things much differently than a lawyer would because the lawyer is privy to more information about a case. So that could also be a problem. There's really no way to input everything that the lawyer is aware of because there's lots of nuances there. Then there's auditability and traceability, which has to do with trying to figure out, so like backtrack and determine what all the data that's in the data set and all of the algorithms, who designed it, and then be able to look back and monitor how the system is actually working, whether it's delivering incomplete answers or hallucinated answers, and be aware that there's really no clear way to examine the weighting or why it's prioritizing certain things. And traceability is also a challenge because it may not be clear where the AI biases originated and how they influence the research over time. Confidentiality and privacy, this is a huge issue, right? You have a duty to protect client confidentiality and privacy, ensuring that the AI tools processing sensitive client data are secure and comply with relevant privacy regulations. So a law firm that uses AI-powered like contract analysis tools that stores client data on its servers outside of a jurisdiction could possibly get into trouble because they're violating data protection laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act or the CPRA or the GDPR or other privacy laws. Now Colorado has another privacy law associated with it, or HIPAA or FERPA or whatever it is, right? So you have to be aware of that. And of course, you cannot upload client information, just directly upload their client information because we have no idea really what these different platforms are doing with what we're importing. I know Claude does not use any of the data that we upload and add it to its training data set. But you could still be violating somebody's confidentiality. Then there's alignment. So AI systems should be aligned with the values, ethics, and goals of the legal profession, right? Promoting fairness, justice, and the rule of law. But the difficulty with aligning these tools to human values, assuming that we can understand these values ourselves, is sometimes our values are conflict with one another, right? So we're all concerned about the environment, but we don't want to give up the convenience of our cars, right? Or we value life, but we know people are going to die in certain very dangerous professions, right? So we make trade-offs all the time, and how you can interpret that, how you can write that into an algorithm so that a machine understands that is very challenging. So if you had an AI tool that its goal was to optimize legal strategies, right, to win all cases at all costs, it might mean that it's exploiting loopholes or engaging in unethical practices, misaligning the values of the profession. Then there's liability and accountability issues, right? As it becomes more prevalent in the legal profession, questions arise regarding liability when AI systems make errors or cause harm. So to what extent are lawyers to delegate their tasks to machines? And then what happens if something goes wrong, right? Can the lawyer just point at the developer and say, you know, you miswrote this, or it's all your fault? When the developer is probably going to turn around and say, no, fast, you're the learned intermediary here, right? You're supposed to check everything that we do. So who's going to be liable and who's going to be accountable for these different issues that arise? Is going to be a challenge. We'll have to figure that out as we go along. Any questions?
Thank you. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
That was great.
Thanks.
My question is maybe not rhetorical, but probably not answerable either. How do you, given that transparency is such an important value in this, how do you achieve that when so many of the AI developers and providers are private for-profit corporations that will treat their products as, proprietary, and what makes them work is trade secrets? How do you achieve a balance there?
Well, that's being worked out by Congress and other legislators, right? So right now we're kind of in a self-governance period where the industry is just governing itself, because there is such a huge challenge to doing that. And the companies, Sam Altman will appear before Congress and say that he's all for regulation, but then he's spending millions of dollars behind the scenes working with legislators not to have regulation. So until and unless some regulation is put in place to ensure, and some of the agencies are working on this now to ensure that there's transparency without having to disclose their trade secrets, but still provide some information about how these decisions are being made. So they, put some light into the black box. We're not going to have an answer to it, right? So government working with other people, with experts, privacy advocates, and researchers, and other people who are concerned with these issues together are going to have to come up with some kind of regulation for it. But then there's the problem of, how do you regulate? Do you just add to existing law? Do you create new law? Do you create a new agency to oversee all of this? is it global? I mean, there's so many different challenges to regulating it. So there's my non-answer.
So I have a question. You mentioned the judge in Texas who had a requirement that if a lawyer used AI that they had to disclose that. Do you see that as something that is a trend that more judges are going to be doing? Like what's the point? Is it performative on that judge? Like what does it matter what the lawyer is using to craft their arguments or to do the research? I mean, they're not having to disclose if they use Westlaw or if they use Lexis or they use their super genius, law student intern, whatever.
Right.
If they're still ultimately liable for the product, the lawyer is still responsible if they don't check the cases or if they cite something improperly. What's the point of having them, mark that they use generative AI to create the content?
Well, this Judge Brantley Starr, he said that it was kind of performative. He just really wanted to, it was right on the heels, I mean, within days of the news about Stephen Schwartz in New York and that MATA case. So he wanted to his goal was to educate lawyers in his court about what the issues involved with using generative AI, because a lot of lawyers didn't really know how to use it and they were relying on it too much. So he wanted to draw their attention to it, and he's hoping that he can just, cancel this standing order that he has. Eventually lawyers will have enough experience with it to know that there are issues. But the problem is, on the heels of his order, the last time I checked, there were 27 standing orders in different courts all over the country. And there's a couple of databases that are being maintained, one by EDRM that has all the standing orders to date that have been issued. But some of them don't understand generative AI really to begin with. So when they issued their orders, they said AI, right? You have to disclose that you used AI. So is that spell check? Is that search? I mean, do you have to disclose Lexis plus AI, like you were saying? So it was very, very broad in some courts that you have to disclose, but that the end of it is that a human reviewed it and legal expertise was put to bear, and that what they're filing with the court is not generated by AI, not checked, right? It's not hallucinated stuff. But he admits, Brantley Starr admits that it was really just educational. And I had one student who was interning with him and received that certification, like, you must file this with the court. And he's like, what the hell is this? I have to do what? And he didn't even know about generative AI to begin with at all. He had never used it, but he still had to file his certification. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much, Elmer. I appreciate it. Thanks. Hope you guys have a great rest of the conference. I'll be online watching.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right,